This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible manuscript, handwritten in Ethiopia's sacred liturgical language, Ge'ez.
Think. A man spends his entire life in a place where even reaching there is not easy for an ordinary person. He has an old manuscript with him, and that man does not show it to any outsider for a full 60 years. In northern Ethiopia, there is a high cliff called Debra Dammo. Even today, to reach there, you have to climb up with the help of a leather rope. It is said that in 1965, a monk went there, and then he never looked back toward the world below again. He spent his entire life guarding that manuscript in a small stone room. He never preached from it, nor did he allow it to leave the room. But on the last night of his life, something happened that surprised the other monks who were there too. Just before dying, he finally revealed why that manuscript had been kept hidden for so many years. And it is said that inside it were things related to the 40 days after Jesus Christ was resurrected, things that were quite different from the story in the ordinary Bible. After all, what was inside those pages that had to be hidden for 60 years? And what did the monk reveal that night? To know the answer to this question, stay with us until the end of the video. Before moving ahead in the video, subscribe to the channel so that you can watch such videos first. In northern Ethiopia, there is a place that, just by hearing about it, you will get an idea of how difficult it must have been to live there. Its name is Debra Dammo. It is a monastery built on top of a high, almost straight cliff. Looking from below, it seems as if someone has cut off the top of a mountain and created a completely different world on top of it. The way to reach there is also not like an ordinary road. To go up, you have to take the support of a long leather rope, meaning one small mistake and there is a straight drop below. It was at this very place that a monk arrived in 1965. His name is said to be Abatkla. But the most surprising thing is that after going up, he did not step back into the world below for nearly 60 years. He spent his life in a small stone room. But he was not there just to live. He had a very old manuscript with him, and he had taken the responsibility of guarding it upon himself. Think about it, staying in the same place for 6 decades, waking up before sunrise, doing the same work every day, and watching over the same manuscript every day. During this time, the other monks living around him grew old, and some of them also died. Scholars and researchers came from outside and tried to learn about the manuscript, but they too had to return empty-handed. Now the question is not just how old that book was. The real question is, why would a person sacrifice his entire life to guard something? And most importantly, the thing he had been hiding for so many years was not an ordinary Bible. Now the story becomes a little more interesting, because to understand the manuscript that a monk had been guarding for so many years, we first need to understand a little about the Christian tradition of Ethiopia. In the Western Christian tradition, the Bible is generally said to have 66 books, but the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition has its own different tradition, in which the number of books in the Bible is considered to be 81. This means that many books and old texts survived there as part of the religious tradition, which are not present in the same way in other Christian traditions. The language of these texts is also special in itself. In Ethiopia, the Ge'ez language has been used for ancient religious writings. It is said that for centuries, this language has been an important way of preserving religious knowledge. The Book of Enoch is also part of this tradition. It is an old text that contains things related to angels, especially the Watchers, meaning things that many people in the Western world did not grow up considering as part of the ordinary Bible. Now just think, if Ethiopia preserved such old religious texts for such a long time, could some part of the story of Jesus Christ also have survived there, which was not preserved as clearly in other places? This is where the biggest question of the story comes forward: the 40 days after Jesus Christ was resurrected. In the story of the common Gospels, This entire period is mentioned very briefly. But what if something happened during these 40 days that later generations did not explain in much detail? And the answer to this very question was hidden in the part that the Western Gospel story almost touches on and then moves forward. Those same 40 days, in which perhaps the biggest mystery of this entire story was hidden. Now the story reaches a point where it is no longer just about an old book. Jesus Christ was crucified. His disciples saw his death. Then the story of his resurrection comes forward. After this, he returns among his disciples, and finally, there is a mention of his going to heaven, meaning ascension. But there is one thing worth noticing here. There is said to be a period of around 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension. Such a long period, during which Jesus stayed with his disciples, talked to them, and prepared them for what was ahead. Even then, the main story of the Western Gospels does not give much detail about these 40 days. Especially the story in Luke moves ahead quite quickly. This is where the alleged story of the manuscript takes a different path. According to it, Jesus did not return only to comfort his disciples. His manner is described as if a commander were giving his people final instructions before a major danger arrived, and his concern was not only about that time. He was afraid that in the future, institutions could be built in his name that would move in a completely different direction from the original message. For example, a stone temple. No matter how grand it may look from the outside, one day it can break. But the problem is not only with the stone. The real question arises when such a large institution is built around an idea that someone can claim ownership over it. Then that same institution can collect wealth, gain power, and establish control over people. The alleged warning in the manuscript was that you should not make a message so big and permanent that later people can take control of it in its name. But the story does not end here, because in this manuscript, the danger was not described as existing only in the outside world. It also talked about a kind of illness inside human beings, one that starts slowly, and a person does not even realize that it is spreading inside them. The room was almost silent now. The old monk's breathing had become slower than before. The small flame of the candle would sometimes become brighter, and then become faint again. Johannes leaned closer to him so that he could clearly hear his slow voice. Then the old man began to tell him about the first teaching. He said that two kinds of winds move inside a human being. One is the wind of life, and the other is the wind of mistake. But here, mistake did not simply mean some small sin. It was described as something that slowly spreads inside a person. It could begin with greed, some wrong desire, or even a lie that a person keeps telling until they themselves start believing it as the truth. Slowly, this same thing begins to change a person's nature. From the outside, everything still looks completely normal. He eats, works, sleeps, talks to people, and continues living his everyday life. But something else is happening inside. The manuscript uses a very strange name for such people: walking graves. Think about it. A person may look completely alive from the outside, but the goodness, sensitivity, and truth inside them may have slowly disappeared. They walk around, laugh, meet people, but the light inside them has gone out. To explain this, the manuscript does not look at the soul like a court, but like a body. Just as the body can become sick, and sometimes a person does not even realize it in the beginning, this illness inside can also spread silently. And this is the most frightening part. The illness does not care whether you accept it or refuse to believe it. But if there is a cure for the illness, then what is it? According to the manuscript, the cure was not some big ritual or ceremony. The cure was knowledge, truth, and constantly watching your own thoughts. Johannes sat a little away from the manuscript throughout the night. He felt that he might need some time to understand what he had just heard. But the old monk suddenly stopped when he reached the next line. Silence filled the room again. The other monks also started looking at him. It seemed as if they knew that what was about to be said now was much heavier than everything else. The old man slowly raised his head and said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." That was all. After this, no one said anything for a few moments. Just think, if this statement is really understood in the same way, then what would it mean? It does not mean that a person should leave religion or prove an institution wrong. Rather, it means something else. If a person can search for God within themselves, then the need for some particular building, authority, or middleman between them, and God is no longer the same as before. And this is where this idea could become a very big challenge to the religious system of that time, where there were priests, temples, offerings, rituals, and people holding religious authority. If someone was told that the path to God could also be found within themselves, then it was natural for questions to arise, because no one can claim ownership over that silence inside. A farmer can feel it while working in the fields, and an emperor can search for it while sitting in his palace. Between the two, there is only that half-second of silence where a person can observe their own thoughts. Meaning, this teaching was not talking about ending religion. It was simply moving the center of religion from an institution to within the human being. But if the second teaching itself makes the need for a middleman so much smaller, then why did the monks consider the third teaching even more dangerous than this? The old monk's breathing had become even weaker now. Johannes tried to give him some water, but he slowly refused. The flame of the candle burning in the room was also becoming smaller now. The old man's voice had become so quiet that Johannes had to move very close to hear him. Then he told him the third and most frightening warning. He said, "Darkness will not always come in front of you like an open enemy. Many times it will come wearing the face of holiness." That was the most frightening part, because according to this story, that enemy would not criticize Jesus Christ. It would speak in his name. It would not break the cross, but would raise it above its own flag. It would not erase his teachings, but would repeat them inside huge buildings. But slowly, it would change the real meaning of those teachings. That was the strangest part of this warning. It is easy to recognize someone who is openly opposing you. But if the same deception is hidden behind a face that you already trust, then it becomes very difficult to recognize. For this reason, in this story, the Antichrist is not explained as one future king or dictator. Instead, it is seen as a system that stands behind the image of Jesus Christ and slowly moves away from his original message. And in history, many examples are given to point toward such things: the combination of wealth and religious power, political strength, wars in the name of religion, the Crusades, the Inquisition, and empires that connected their political authority with the symbol of the cross. But the question here is not which of these was right or wrong. The real question is even bigger. If this warning was really written in such an ancient manuscript, then did any outsider ever actually see it? And this is where the story was about to move outside that mountain. Until now, the story was limited only to that mountain and the monks living there. But then there came a time when a scholar from the outside world got quite close to this ancient heritage of Ethiopia. It is said to have been in the late 1990s. French scholar Jacques Mercier arrived in Ethiopia. His work was not to search for any mystery. He went there as a researcher, to look at old documents, estimate their age, and understand how old they really were. During this time, he came across old illustrated manuscripts called the Germa Gospels. These manuscripts were later said to date from around 330 to 650 AD. If this dating is considered correct, then they would be among the very old books connected to the early Christian world. For Mercier, this was not just some old document. As a researcher, he was looking at it carefully, trying to understand the condition of the pages, the writing, the illustrations, and the signs related to its age. But sometimes, something does not affect you only through the mind. It can also affect you when you see it right in front of your eyes. Think about it. You have a page in your hands that someone is opening in front of them even today, hundreds of years after it was written. Something from the world you have only read about in books suddenly comes into your own hands. Still, there was a very big difference between Mercier and the monk living on that mountain. Mercier could finish his investigation, close the manuscript, take his notes, go back, catch a plane, and return to the same modern world within a few hours. But the monk on the mountain could not do that. He stayed there with the same mystery for 6 decades. And perhaps that is why this story was not just the story of a manuscript, because it was claimed that another much bigger mystery was hidden beneath that manuscript, the Ark of the Covenant. Now the story reaches something whose name suddenly makes the whole story much bigger. Ark of the Covenant, meaning the Ark of the Covenant. In the Ethiopian tradition, there is a very old claim that this Ark has not been lost. It is said that even today, it is safely kept in the ancient city of Axum in Ethiopia, near the church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. But here too, the story is not that simple. According to the belief, only one person guards this holy ark. After becoming the guardian, he spends his entire life with that responsibility and becomes separated from the ordinary world. The most important source of this story is considered to be an ancient Ethiopian text called the Debra Dammo. It contains the story of the Queen of Sheba, King Solomon, and their son Menelik I. It is said that Menelik went to Jerusalem to meet his father Solomon. While returning to Ethiopia, something also came with him, and its name was the Ark. According to the story, the original Ark was taken from there, and another copy was placed in its place. Now the question is, what was inside that Ark? In some events connected with it in the Bible, there are descriptions of such power that people even die after coming into contact with it. In some places, imagery like fire and energy can be seen. Some modern interpretations have tried to connect these descriptions with something like radiation, but this is not an established scientific fact. Then comes the strangest part. It is said that over time, problems like weak eyesight, cataracts, changes in the skin, and getting old quickly were seen among its guardians. Was this just a coincidence? Or was there really something in the environment of that room that affected every guardian who lived there? If the Ark is really present there, then the question is not only what is inside it. The question is also what exactly happened to the people who protected it. In the story of the Ark, perhaps the biggest mystery is about its guardians, even more than the Ark itself. It is said that whoever was chosen as the new guardian was completely healthy in the beginning. But after that, his life changed. He became almost completely separated from ordinary people, stayed around that holy place, and spent the rest of his life with that responsibility. Then slowly, changes started appearing in his body. Things like weak eyesight, cataracts, changes in the skin, and the body becoming weak before its age are said to have been seen among guardians from different generations. If this had happened with only one person, then perhaps it could easily be called a coincidence. But the story claims that similar changes were seen among several guardians at different times. Now, 2 different viewpoints come forward. The first viewpoint is religious. People who believe in this tradition connect it with the power of the holy object, the responsibility of protecting it, or some kind of spiritual price. The second viewpoint is completely different. It is possible that there was some physical factor in the environment of that place that affected the body of a person who stayed there for a long time. But which of these is correct, we do not have any definite answer. And perhaps this is what makes this story even more interesting. Because there were also times in Ethiopian history when people connected the safety of their country with this same religious belief. In 1896, Italy attacked Ethiopia. Despite modern weapons and the power of a European empire, the Ethiopian army defeated Italy at the Battle of Adwa. For some people, this was not just a military victory. They felt that the country that had protected its sacred heritage had somehow also been protected. But the mystery of Ethiopia was not only inside some ark. Sometimes, the entire landscape itself becomes a mystery. And the biggest example of this was Lalibela. There is a place in Ethiopia that, at first glance, looks as if the buildings were not built here, but were taken out from under the ground. This place is Lalibela. There are around 11 old churches here, but these churches were not built upward like ordinary buildings by joining stones together. They were carved downward directly into volcanic rock. The walls, windows, pillars, rooms, and even the paths for draining water are all part of the same rock. Just think, if a big mistake happened while cutting the stone, there was no way to put that part back together. One wrong cut could damage the entire structure. And this is where Lalibela's biggest question begins. According to tradition, it took around 24 years to build these churches. But such a huge project would have needed thousands of workers and a very long time. Millions of tons of rock must have been cut, so then the question arises, where did all that rubble go? There is no direct answer to this. Another story is also told in the religious tradition there. It is said that during the day, humans cut the stone, and at night, angels came and continued the same work. They are said to have had tools that made cutting stone much easier than human work. One of the most famous places is the Church of St. George. It was carved downward into the ground in the shape of a large cross. There are also underground paths and tunnels around it, where people connected with religious training used to walk in the darkness. And here the story once again returns to the same manuscript. Just like the Mashafa Kidan, here too, you have to pass through darkness before reaching the light. But now the story of the stone and the manuscript was about to meet a place where the story was perhaps the most personal. Through blood relations, the deepest secret of Ethiopia does not flow through stone, but through blood. This part of the story is connected to the old royal dynasty of Ethiopia. There was a tradition there known as the Solomonic dynasty. It is claimed that the Ethiopian royal family's lineage was thousands of years old, and that its connection went back to King Solomon and King David. One of the most famous figures in this tradition was Haile Selassie. He was known by titles such as the Lion of Judah. This was not just a name of honor. Behind it was also the claim that his lineage was connected to the tradition of David. Now this is where the story takes another interesting turn. In Christian tradition, Mary is also connected to the lineage of David, and if the Ethiopian royal tradition also connects its lineage to the same tradition, then a deep family connection begins to appear in this story. But one thing needs to be made clear here. Some modern genetic studies are interpreted as showing signs of ancient Levantine ancestry in the Ethiopian population, meaning some people's ancestors may have had connections with the region that is known today as the areas around Israel and Syria. But it would not be correct to call this direct evidence of any Ethiopian bloodline of Jesus Christ. Still, many old traditions survived in Ethiopian Christianity that make it different from other traditions. Traditions such as the Sabbath on Saturday, circumcision on the 8th day, and Levitical dietary rules continued for a long time. Johannes was now beginning to understand that the old monk was not simply telling the story of a manuscript. He was telling the story of the memory, faith, and identity of an entire civilization. But now the biggest question was in front of him. If all of this was so important, then why was the manuscript kept hidden from the world? Now look at the whole story once again, and connect everything together. A monk who spent nearly 60 years of his life on top of a mountain, a manuscript that he never allowed to reach the hands of any outsider. Then, the alleged teachings of Jesus Christ after his resurrection, described in that manuscript, including warnings about religious power and institutions. After this, the story of the Ark of the Covenant comes forward. Its guardians, the mysterious things connected with them, then the churches built underground in Lalibela, and finally, the story of the old royal dynasty of Ethiopia. When we connect all these things together, one question keeps coming forward again and again. Why was there a need to keep this manuscript hidden for so long? According to this story, perhaps the reason was that some ideas do not need to be proven wrong. It is enough to stop them from reaching the wrong person. Because any powerful idea can challenge an institution, and that same idea, in someone else's hands, can also become a weapon of power. Someone can use it for their own benefit, someone can try to suppress it, and someone can build their political power in its name. But another question comes up here. Was keeping the manuscript hidden a way of protecting the truth? Or can keeping a truth away from the world also be a form of control? Perhaps the answer to this question was hidden in the old monk's final night. The candle flame had now become very small. His breathing was extremely weak. The other monks sitting in the room were silent. Johannes was leaning very close to him. The man who had said nothing for 60 years was finally speaking, but this time there was no attempt in his voice to prove any mystery. It seemed as if he was simply completing one final responsibility. He had not spent his entire life keeping the manuscript so that he could show it to the world. He had protected it so that it would not fall into the wrong hands. And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable question of this entire story. If a truth has to be hidden for 2,000 years to protect it, is that truth still the world's, or does it belong only to the people who guarded it? Now the decision is yours. According to you, what is the biggest mystery in this story? The manuscript, the Ark, Lalibela, or the warning that the most dangerous deception does not always come with the face of an enemy? Be sure to share your opinion in the comments. And if you like such mysterious and unheard stories, then like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because in the next story, we will go toward another mystery, whose answers may still not be completely in front of us even today.